County for allowing me to speak this morning, and for the Ohio State University and the Central Ohio Technical College for providing this venue, which we can celebrate Dr. King's legacy and life. And I'd like to thank my grandfather, who could not be here today, but for inviting me to speak in the first place. I don't know what he was thinking, but I'm here now, so I'm honored to speak with you today. And I hope that my words may serve as a reflection on the victories of the past, but also on the challenges of the future. And doing this all in Dr. Martin Luther King's great legacy. That is to say, while we are gathered here today in remembrance of Dr. King, we cannot rest on the laurels of past generations to reassure us that humanity continues to make progress in the realm of social responsibility and shared prosperity. To begin with, I'd like to share three excerpts from a speech that Dr. King delivered in 1967 at the Hungry Club Forum in Atlanta, Georgia, where he described the struggles against racism, poverty, and militarism in great detail, a trifecta that he referred to as the three evils. About racism, Dr. King pronounced that there can be no gainsaying of the fact that racism is still alive all over America. Racial injustice is still the Negro's burden and America's shame. And we must face the hard fact that many Americans would like to have a nation which is a democracy for white Americans, but simultaneously a dictatorship over black Americans. We must face the fact that we still have much work to do in the area of race relations. Concerning poverty, he said, the second evil that I want to deal with is the evil of poverty. Like a monstrous octopus, it spreads its tentacles into cities and hamlets and villages all over our nation. Some 40 million of our brothers and sisters are poverty-stricken, unable to gain the basic necessities of life. And so often we allow them to become invisible because our society is so affluent that we don't see the poor. Lastly, turning to war and conflict, he said, now I want to deal with the third evil that constitutes the dilemma of our nation and the world, and that is the evil of war. Somehow these three evils are tied together, he says. The triple evils of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism. The great problem and the great challenge facing mankind today is to get rid of war. We have left ourselves as a nation morally and politically isolated in the world. We have greatly strengthened the forces of reaction in America and incited violence and hatred among our own people. We have diverted attention from civil rights. During a period of war, when a nation becomes obsessed with the guns of war, social programs inevitably suffer. People become insensitive to pain and agony in their own midst. Dr. King's words are informative and illuminating, and it should come as no surprise that those excerpts might sound like a familiar situation today. That is because, even though Dr. King fought those three evils in his time, they still persist. However, Dr. King's solution to these evils was to promote a vision of the world that sought to unify people, the world over, by focusing on our shared humanity. And that's what I want to talk about today, is our shared humanity and how we're all in this together as a human race. Now, what I just said sounds great, like it would fit well on a Hallmark card or a nice tweet out to friends and family over the holiday. But if you think about what I said, that acknowledging our shared humanity is indeed a solution to combat the three evils of racism, poverty, militarism that Dr. King talked about. The truth of that statement speaks for itself. Or for the lawyers in the room, res equal loquitur, if I said that correctly, the thing speaks for itself. And I'd also like to share, this is the quotation that is sort of the theme for this event, from one of Dr. King's speech, in his own words. An individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. That is to say, when we realize that our destinies are, as a human race, are intertwined with one another, it gets harder to justify discriminating against someone else due to race, ethnicity, or dismissing them because you don't understand their culture or where they come from. It gets harder to deny the impoverished a suitable standard of living that befits the dignity of a human being, or to turn a blind eye at the working person who gets evicted and puts on the street of Columbus or Newark because they can no longer afford rent due to job loss, rent inflation, government shutdown, or otherwise. It gets harder to support wars where the innocent lose their lives, and where the sons and daughters of America feel compelled to fight down foreign soil for reasons that they don't quite understand. It gets harder to ignore the violence that happens in our own backyard. In truth, Dr. King encountered the same problems, the same evils in his time, and sought to bring the world together rather than see it torn apart. However, it would be a mistake to mischaracterize Dr. King's beliefs and strategies as non-confrontational. To the contrary, Dr. King's keen sense of justice would not allow him to sit idly by while those in power exploited or oppressed those who were not in power. I am sure you have all heard that an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That is true, and also not just a feel-good statement to share with friends and family on a holiday, but something that really is useful, like the concept of shared humanity as an analytical tool. That is to say, events on one corner of the globe often result in a ripple effect that touches everyone else, whether you want to believe so or not. We are all connected in this world. This phenomenon has been pushed forward by advances in technology. What has been referred to as an example of this, what has been referred to as the Arab Spring of 2011 is one such example, where various movements across the Middle East lent ideological support to one another in order to achieve goals that were actually specific to each country. Notwithstanding the results of such movements, one thing was clear after the Arab Spring, that we were now in a time of greater connectivity than we have ever been in the history of the world. And depending on how we use that capability, we can embrace our collective humanity or further divide ourselves. Turning to 2019, it appears that we have indeed used our ability to connect the people across the world to both bring people together and to further divide ourselves. For every movement organized through social media, such as the 2017 Women's March, there exists an echo chamber, mind you, that is tailored with algorithmic precision to every user, that prevents us from seeing eye to eye or truly connecting with one another. A question to consider, though, is whether such echo chambers were created or whether they already existed prior to the internet and social media. Question's a bit rhetorical because of course they did. And such echo chambers breed groupthink, and groupthink breeds isolation, and isolation breeds prejudice against outsiders, and that prejudice breeds racism, tribalism, nationalism, and those isms turn into conflict, and that conflict turns into war. And all the while, the have-nots most likely pay the biggest price when it comes to prejudice, war, and poverty. With that in mind, Dr. King boldly proclaimed in a 1968 speech in New York that what this country needs is a revolution in values, and that we need to move from being a thing-oriented society to a people-oriented society. To quote Mayor Hall from a conversation we just had earlier, people are the greatest asset that we have in any community. The need for a revolution in values still rings true today. This notion relates back to the earlier discussion about shared humanity. Materialism has allowed us to forget at times that our fellow man is more important than the bottom line. We need to reorient ourselves by putting people first, not profit, not social standing, not geography, not even nation, but people. The three evils discussed earlier all result from us not understanding that humanity should come first and foremost in how we interact with each other and govern each other and ourselves. However, the decades that have passed since the height of the civil rights movement are full of examples of us doing the opposite. In addition to its progress, the world has seen more conflict, more nativism, and more poverty and income inequality. People in my generation have known conflict for most of their lives, from wars that seem to have no end in sight, to violence in schools. We have normalized violence to the point that it's no longer as shocking to hear about it on the evening news every week. We have normalized poverty to the point that we just see it as the cost of the nation doing business and not something to eradicate or move towards eradicating. Rampant income inequality and stagnant wages are things mentioned in academic articles and newspaper op-eds, but do not seem to take priority when it comes to the nation's policy. It's almost 40% of the nation's wealth, being owned by 1% of the population, is supposed to be the natural order of things, even though this has not been the case since the 1920s. Another example of poverty normalization is that viewing healthcare as a right rather than a privilege is so far outside of the scope of our collective imagination that we accept the fact that we have to pay $2,000 for a trip to the emergency room, whereas patients in other developed nations may only have to pay $10 out of pocket for any given surgery.